Chapter 60. The Special Choice Ordeal in the Palace of Adrian Empire, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, Adrian Empire's capital, Samuel City, Palace area. The gentry banquet held by the heir to the throne Prince Joseph was attacked and in a chaotic state. The target of the assassins was not Prince Joseph but rather high-ranking officials at the scene. After the initial surprise, numerous imperial guards had immediately appeared around Prince Joseph. With them at the scene, the assassins couldn't easily make a move against the prince. Those honored guests who hadn't brought any guards suffered disaster. The assassins stabbed them from behind or their throats were slit. The originally lively gentry banquet turned into a bloody banquet. The guards outside the palace wanted to rush over here, but they needed time due to a detour, preventing them from protecting the guests. In this big chaotic battle, the most secure place was the place reserved for Light Church. Bishop Nichols was still not awake from his drunken sleep. However, the two Light Church's saintesses, Punishment Saintess Tiffany and Light Saintess Maria, were somewhat worried about Clyde's situation. The other members of Light Church indifferently watched the mayhem around themselves. The Light Church's attire on their bodies was the best amulet against such man-made disasters. They sat still in the same place without worrying about those assassins making a move on them. No one cared about the whereabouts of Princess Alyssa. Because the banquet hall was in chaos, no one had the time to care about those matters. In the women's washroom, Clyde pondered how to deal with Princess Alyssa, her close girlfriends Anna and Sivia, and the other golden daughters of other aristocrat families. They were completely in wickedly bound states and lacked the strength to resist. If Clyde wanted to, he could do anything he wanted pleased to them. Clyde looked at the fragments of cloth on the ground for a while and felt a little awkward. Those assassins had completely destroyed the lovely clothes of these ladies. Their remaining bras and panties were also in half-damaged states. At this moment, he couldn't find a cloth to give them to spare them embarrassment. The banquet hall outside was too chaotic. Clyde was worried that after he left, someone might really enter. If other men came over and saw the current appearances of Princess Alyssa and the others, they might truly not be able to resist the temptation to commit a sinister crime. The assassins had similarly attacked the next-door men's washroom, but no one had been there. It had been an empty attack. After the banquet hall suffered an attack, it fell into a chaotic state for the time being. In a short time, no one would come to the washroom here. However, it was hard to estimate the exact time because the assassins fought with efficiency and would not fight a protracted war. Although Clyde had already exchanged the notice boards that he realized were actually the signs after watching what the assassins had done outside the washroom, returning them to normal, he couldn't eliminate those lucky perverted existences who would, intentionally or not, take the wrong way. Thinking of this, Clyde walked over and tore off the remnants of the damaged bras and panties worn by Princess Alyssa and the others. Princess Alyssa thought that he wanted to further humiliate her and helplessly shook her head, seemingly begging for the invisible man to be stung by conscience and let them off as tears rolled down her cheeks. The other ladies weren't as firm as Princess Alyssa. Once the final pieces of clothing on their bodies defending their collective innocence were casually stripped off by Clyde, they were so scared that they directly fainted. Only the close girlfriends of Princess Alyssa, Anna and Sivia, could persist through this trauma. With tears in their eyes, they forced themselves to not faint. Clyde then used brute force to get rid of the red leather collars around their necks. Afterward, he picked them up and walked outside. The other ladies were fortunate. Because they were already unconscious, they didn't struggle. Princess Alyssa and her close girlfriends, Anna and Sivia, however, struggled even harder. Although their hands were bound behind their backs, they could still move their legs to futilely kick out at him. From the moment they were held, both sides' flesh came into intimate contact. Princess Alyssa was horrified to discover that the man carrying them was also naked. This time, she struggled even more violently in order to desperately save her integrity. Clyde had no choice but to take out a red rope and bind the thighs of these three girls together, making them unable to move. Clyde could do nothing about it. Now, he was only in his boxer shorts, and it would be hard to explain why to them. Princess Alyssa and the others were already in states that easily tempted a man to commit a crime. If they continued randomly moving, their luscious skin brushing against his would simply increase the difficulty of this ordeal. Clyde feared that he truly wouldn't be able to restrain himself at that time. This time, Princess Alyssa was completely honest. Because of her worries and fears, her snowy white body shivered. She didn't know what this man who was holding her wanted to do. Losing moral integrity was barely tolerable, but she feared the other party might directly kidnap her. At that time, she would be imprisoned for a long period of time and forced to suffer every day. That picture was something Princess Alyssa didn't dare to imagine. The palace was in chaos, and it was very easy to fish in troubled waters. Clyde used contract magic to summon a few subordinates to help him. He took advantage of the time when the palace was in chaos to summon a few shadows that were actually high-level undead such as the Corpse Emperor and a few Corpse Kings. Because Lord Evil God himself had personally summoned them, the Undead Legion attached great importance to this task, and Corpse Emperor who was over 6,000 years old decided to personally lead the troops. After they were teleported to the vicinity of the palace via contract magic, they flew to Clyde and landed near the washroom. Using an oversimplified and crude way, they cut open the wall. Because the banquet hall was still in chaos, the cacophonous grating emanating from their efforts basically didn't attract any attention. The attention of the Imperial Guards was focused in the banquet hall and the prince. No one even noticed that evil creatures had invaded the washroom area. Clyde looked at the Corpse Emperor in front of him, and after thinking for a while, he discarded the idea of exhorting them to not use such a crude method of opening the door next time. These undead couldn't be blamed for not knowing to gently open the door. After all of them were demonic creatures. Clyde didn't need to open his mouth to speak, he could issue orders to these undead subordinates with just his thoughts. He didn't need to worry about the possibility of Princess Alyssa or the others hearing his voice. Corpse Emperor and his subordinates had brought several flying demonic carriages. Clyde put Princess Alyssa and the others one by one into a carriage before making Corpse Emperor use the demonic carriage to send them outside the palace first and leave them at a luxurious suite in Austin Hotel next to Robert Hotel, Light Church's place of habitation. He wanted to temporarily send them away from the Imperial Palace due to troubles rife among its grounds. After the assassination situation resolved, he would find the right time to send them back. Clyde had anonymously booked an entire floor of Austin Hotel in advance. Usually, there were no customers, so upon seeing that Clyde wanted to book an entire floor, they happily rented it out to him. After receiving several gold coins as rent, Austin Hotel even exempted him from the basic review procedures. They neither verified the authenticity of Clyde's identity nor examined his rental purpose as generally required by imperial rule. When Princess Alyssa and others recovered a little consciousness, they felt that they were lying on a soft big bed. They don't know where that mysterious man had brought them. In any case, they realized this big bed was not a good thing because it made things convenient for the other party to commit a crime at any time. Not even a single restraint on their bodies had been removed, so they could only lie on the big bed, waiting for their unknown fates. After they had been brought to this place, no one else came, and the atmosphere was unusually quiet. Along with the passage of time, Princess Alyssa was gradually unable to endure this quietness. Compared to their current anxious states of not knowing anything at all, they would have been better off being directly humiliated. Like that, she would at least know the other party's objective. But in her current state, she didn't know what the other party was thinking. Clyde had inadvertently made Princess Alyssa and others experience a neglect play. The Corpse Emperor and Corpse Kings under Clyde had intelligence and might have misunderstood Clyde's true intentions. After arranging Princess Alyssa and others in the room, they locked the door from the outside and ignited a special condiment. That strange fragrance made Princess Alyssa and others enter half-dazed states, preventing them from concentrating on anything but the subtle feelings threatening to emerge from the depths of their hearts. Fortunately, these ladies all had magician-class professions, and their spiritual resistances were high, so they only entered a half-dazed state, nothing more. The dosage of that fragrance was not very high, otherwise, they might not have been able to suppress their own instincts. This condiment was something that was used in red mansions to liven things up. If ordinary girls smelt it, her instinct would be aroused, and she would let the other party do whatever he liked. As an experienced behind-the-scenes manipulator, Clyde had long changed into the formal attire of light church and returned to the banquet hall. The assassinations in the hall had just ended. After the assassins had successfully killed many bigwigs, they smoothly withdrew, suffering hardly any casualties. Adrian Empire's side, however, had suffered big losses. A large number of influential officials had been assassinated and the palace was wrecked. Prince Joseph was fine without any serious issues. The moment the surprise attack occurred, the imperial guards had risked their lives to keep this heir to the throne safe, not letting any assassin succeed. After being unable to assassinate their main target, the assassins had vented their grievances on the other aristocrats. When Clyde had returned, the banquet hall was dyed red with blood, leaving just a few imperial guards and court priests standing. By the time the sorting and treating of the wounded began, Prince Joseph had already withdrawn under the cover of the imperial guards. Because the hall was still in a chaotic state, no one paid attention to the whereabouts of Princess Alyssa and the others. They probably thought that they had already fled. As for the people of Light Church, they were readying to leave. They just seemed to be waiting for Clyde's return. After seeing Clyde, the cloudiness on the faces of Punishment Saintess Tiffany and Light Saintess Maria cleared and smiles appeared. They came forward and respectively held Clyde's arms just like how they had arrived. "Clyde, you went to the washroom for so long, did you have an encounter with a beauty?" "Clyde, I worried you had fallen into the toilet. I was just thinking of sending some people to scoop you out." "Cough, cough, Maria, Tiffany, what are you two thinking? How could I have had an encounter with a beauty in the men's washroom?" Facing the intentional ridicule of these two saintesses, Clyde had a slightly guilty conscience because they had truly hit the nail on the head. At that moment, Bishop Nichols also woke up from his drunken sleep and looked at Clyde with a pondering look, seemingly confirming whether this nouveau riche had any plans to purchase a saintess. "Your Excellency Clyde, now, the entire city is under martial law. Let's return to Bradley Cathedral and rest there. It is a branch of Light Church, so it is absolutely safe. Everyone there is a person on our own side." Chapter 61. Martial Law Enforced Night in Adrian Empire's Capital, Part 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, Adrian Empire's capital Samuel City, Light Church's branch Bradley Cathedral. Because of the ambush incident in the palace, martial law was enforced on the entire imperial capital, and the whole city was in a sealed state. According to imperial reports, this sealed state would last for approximately 3 days. During this martial law period, no one was allowed to enter and exit the city without express consent. Even the privileged class, those members of Light Church, had to wait at least 1 day before they had the privilege to exit the city. Clyde could only accept the Bishop Nichols's invitation. Together with Punishment Saintess Tiffany and Light Saintess Maria, he became a temporary guest of Bradley Cathedral. After waiting a day here, he had to think of a way to discreetly leave the city. Clyde was somewhat unaccustomed to staying in a cathedral. As an evil god with a great old one background, the sacred atmosphere made Clyde feel a little uncomfortable. "Your Excellency Clyde, this cathedral is blessed by the goddess. Even a demon king would find it hard to set a single foot in here, and the forces of darkness absolutely cannot enter here." "I see. It truly is an amazing cathedral." Bishop Nichols led the way while boasting about the various good points of Bradley Cathedral. With regards to his boasts, Clyde couldn't agree and could only reply in a perfunctory manner. When Bishop Nichols was busily bragging, he never even imagined that the person behind him was actually an even higher level existence than a demon king. In just this fashion, Clyde openly entered this Bradley Cathedral that the bishop claimed even demon kings would find hard to enter. Bradley Cathedral's internal decoration and layout outclassed that of Adrian Empire's imperial palace. At every side golden walls glowed brilliantly with a dignified air. In terms of financial resources, Light Church crushed most of the human empires. In other words, only a few empires could even be considered on the scale as Light Church in terms of financial resources. Bradley Cathedral enshrined a Valkyrie statue. It was not Cynthia, who Clyde was familiar with. He had treated Cynthia with sincerity, so he knew Cynthia's figure like the palm of his own hand. The Valkyrie statue here was the statue of another with a figure very different from Cynthia's. It was basically impossible for them to be the same person. On the name section, there was no sign. Normally, a Valkyrie's real name was not easily divulged to outsiders. Even Light Church might not know the names of all 7 Valkyries. Your Excellency Clyde, your room is already prepared. It's fine to choose any as you please. There are a lot of free rooms here. Bishop Nichols was busy, preparing the data to report to Light Church's headquarters. After arranging for a nun to lead Clyde to his room, he turned around and left. Clyde followed the nun and arrived at the room prepared for him by Bishop Nichols. The standard of this room's decorations completely surpassed presidential suites of 5-star hotels. That big bed was big enough for several people to lie down simultaneously. The presidential suite built by the rich and imposing Light Church was higher grade than the presidential suite of many grand hotels outside. This room was normally prepared for special guests. Usually, it was not lent out, and its frequency of use was very low. Looking at this luxurious suite, Clyde was somewhat worried. If by chance, Bishop Nichols, that profiteer, charged him money afterward, he would certainly be defrauded. The price of the presidential suite of outside hotels per hour was charged in gold coins. Mr. Clyde, if you need anything, just ring the bell. This suite is for receiving important guests. In Bradley Cathedral, this suite is even grander than the room of Bishop Nichols. Is it too hot? No, it's fine. I am just sweating a bit, nothing more. Is this suite for rent? Not for rent. It is used for receiving important guests. It was last used several months ago. Learning that this suite was even more luxurious than Bishop Nichols's, Clyde was so frightened that he profusely sweated in fear that Bishop Nichols would overcharge him when calculating the rent. Fortunately, that nun clearly explained to him that there was no need to pay any rent here. Only then could Clyde temporarily stay here in ease. However, not long after the nun who had shown Clyde the way left and before Clyde had time to close the door, 2 familiar figures entered the room and quickly closed the door for him. Saintess Tiffany and Saintess Maria had taken the initiative to come here. They were still wearing that formal evening wear, and their somewhat ambiguous movements of closing the door could easily make other people's imaginations roam. Maria, Tiffany, you too. Did you two come to the wrong room? Clyde, the bed is very big here. Why don't you let us stay overnight? Rest assured, we can sleep on the floor. Clyde, the beds in our rooms are inadequate, and there are no luxurious bathtubs. Please let us stay overnight. As it turned out, the rooms of Saintess Maria and Tiffany couldn't hold a candle to Clyde's special luxurious suite, thus, they wanted to lodge here for the night. In addition, they had never been in this luxurious suite, and they wanted to experience it. After realizing their thoughts, Clyde blushed with shame. These 2 saintesses were too daring and seemed to be completely unguarded in front of him. The current actions of these 2 saintesses was no different from taking the initiative to deliver themselves to his doorstep. Clyde considered for a while and finally suppressed all sorts of impulses. Bradley Cathedral was one of Light Church's branches. In this place, putting a hand on Light Church's saintess was not a very wise choice. In addition, Clyde didn't know whether Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany had truly come to freeload or had secretly come for entrapment. In short, regarding this meat pie that had fallen from the sky, Clyde decided not to accept it. Maria, Tiffany, I will give you two this room. I just happened to rent a luxurious floor at Austin Hotel. I will not return tonight. Clyde said this and quickly left Bradley Cathedral like he was running away. Since he had been seen together with Bishop Nichols before, Light Church's holy knights on duty as gatekeepers outside thought that this dashing youth was a trusted aide of Bishop Nichols and were extremely respectful to him. When he left, no one bothered him. He was able to easily get away from Bradley Cathedral. Left in the luxury suite, Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany looked at each other in blank dismay. They had never expected Clyde to be so gentlemanly. He actually didn't have any thoughts on their two beauties who had delivered themselves to his doorstep. If it were not for seeing those female companions around Clyde in Stanley City, these saintesses would have misunderstood Clyde, thinking he didn't like women and was a philosopher like Prince Elvis. Clyde truly is. I was thinking of giving him some benefits tonight, but I didn't expect him to run away like this. Did he go to look for Tiffany? Don't have such improper thoughts. If Clyde truly wanted it, he would have already made a move on us. Why would he run outside to look for other people? You are right, Maria. We don't need to worry about the nuns we chose. Choosing those beautiful colleagues should be fine. Clyde had already rushed to the top floor of Austin Hotel, entirely unaware of two saintesses' discussion afterward. This floor had been booked by Clyde in advance, so he didn't need to worry about other people coming here. After that big event in the Imperial Palace, the entire capital, Samuel City, had tightly enforced security. Soldiers tirelessly patrolled everywhere, and almost no one else walked outside. Because Clyde wore the exclusive formal attire of Light Church, he didn't encounter any cross-examination while moving about the capital. The privilege of Light Church's members could be seen from this. He also didn't know whether the disappearance of the princess was noticed. All along the way, Clyde heard even more rumors concerning the deaths of various aristocrats. Among the various political forces of the Adrian Empire, because many aristocrats had been assassinated, there was the possibility of a complete power reshuffle. Prince Joseph's official status as the successor to the throne didn't have the support of all aristocrats. The aristocrats that had participated in this banquet were all from the faction that supported Prince Joseph. In the assassination, that faction had suffered heavy casualties, making people wonder whether this assassination was the secret scheme of those against the faction that supported Prince Joseph. Clyde had no interest in Andrew Empire's political situation. For Steinbeck Fief, this name only Mother Empire bore an empty title. Other than collecting taxes, there was not any exchange between the two at all. Steinbeck Fief, this novice place, had not received any support at all. Between the human nations of Zemengsi continent, there was no such thing as absolute loyalty. If Clyde felt like Adrian Empire was dying, then Steinbeck Fief, which he controlled, would look for a new Mother Empire. Austin Hotel's top floor. After Clyde entered the room, he saw Princess Alyssa on the big bed. After hearing the sound of the door opening, Princess Alyssa's snowy white body trembled as those footsteps approached her. Because she was not covered in a quilt, from a glance, Princess Alyssa's entire scenery was plainly visible to Clyde. Princess Alyssa's two close girlfriends, Anna and Sivia, were also in the room. They too trembled upon hearing Clyde's arrival. After they had been left alone for so long, they were quite afraid of being imprisoned like this for their entire lives. Looking at their red complexions, Clyde didn't immediately untie their bindings, but rather he walked over and picked them up, one by one, and placed them inside the bathtub in the bathroom, helping them to wash their bodies. Princess Alyssa and the others couldn't move. Their entire bodies were under Clyde's complete control. They just squeezed in the bathtub and let the other party help them wash. Those hands wandering about their body clearly felt like a man's. After the other party washed them clean, the next step would very likely be the bad deed. Thinking of this, Princess Alyssa shook her head as if begging the other party to not tease her. The fragrance acted like a strange drug. When coupled with the ambiguous atmosphere, Princess Alyssa and the others were quickly unable to persist. They shook their heads and shakily nodded their heads. It was unknown whether they wanted Clyde to stop or keep going. Just a moment ago, the Saintesses had seduced him, and he now had to vent it off on Princess Alyssa and the others first. After the bath was over, Clyde removed the small balls sealing the mouths of Princess Alyssa and others, making them able to speak for the time being. Don't do this. I beg you. You can do whatever you want, but don't. Spare us. We will pay money. We will never speak a word about this. Chapter 62. Martial Law Enforced Night in Adrian Empire's Capital, Part 2, you are listening at NovelFull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, Adrian Empire's capital Samuel City. Because of the assassinations in the palace, the entire city was in a sealed state. Clyde had no way to leave, so he was trapped within the capital for a day or two. Thus, he could only observe the changes in the situation and plan his next moves. Bishop Nichols invited him to temporarily stay in Light Church's branch in Adrian Empire, but Clyde let Saintess Myra and Saintess Tiffany use his luxurious suite before leaving. In the luxurious suite of Austin Hotel, Clyde carefully arranged the ladies there. Including Princess Alyssa and the others, there were over 10 aristocrat ladies here, and their attractiveness indexes were also all very high. Although Clyde's way of doing things was somewhat wicked. If he hadn't saved them, these beauties would have still been in the washroom, and their fates might have been even more wicked. The other ladies let Clyde gather them together. They already had completely given up on struggling. Clyde placed them in the bathtub and washed them clean, one by one, before gathering them in the bedroom. After their entire bodies had been touched by the other party, they didn't dare to struggle in fear that they would stimulate the other party, making him immediately put his hands on them. Princess Alyssa, are you awake? Don't be nervous. It's safe here. It's you. Mr. Priest, how come you're here? At the last moment, Clyde suppressed his wicked impulses and didn't put his hands on Princess Alyssa and the others. He just got rid of their black blindfolds, making Alyssa clearly see his appearance. After seeing Clyde, Princess Alyssa felt relieved, but her complexion quickly turned bright red. She had been seen and touched everywhere by the other party. Moreover, Clyde had yet to untie their bindings. At that time, I just happened to find you and took you all away to safety. The palace was too chaotic. Princess Alyssa's close girlfriends, Anna and Sivia, also looked at Clyde with bright red faces. Their current positions truly tempted him to commit a sin. If this handsome guy couldn't restrain himself, then they could only comply. Just when Clyde planned to untie their bindings, the sound of footsteps from downstairs floated up the stairs. Lord Brian, an honored guest, has booked the entire floor above. I truly haven't seen any suspicious individuals. Shut up, Princess Alyssa and the others are missing. The assassins are still inside the city, and the entire city is under martial law. Now, I want to search this place. Clyde was in an awkward situation. Just upon returning, he had run into an inspection to crack down on his current pornographic scene. This was troublesome. If Princess Alyssa and others were seen in this terrible appearance, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. The complexions of Princess Alyssa and others were also burning hot. If they were seen in this appearance, it would truly be harmful to the dignity of their families. However, in such a short time, Clyde was unable to find them any clothing. Thinking quickly, Clyde took out the black blindfolds and small balls and put them on to Princess Alyssa and the others again before they could protest and attract attention. I've offended you. Princess Alyssa, please believe in me. The complexions of Princess Alyssa and the others were bright red like ripe apples now. At this moment, they could only choose to believe in Clyde's judgment. They were not only restrained, but they also lacked energy now. Everything was under Clyde's control. Thinking this, they cooperatively opened their little mouths to let Clyde use the small balls to seal their ability to speak. On this floor, many corpse kings and a corpse emperor hid in a dark corner. If Clyde ordered it, they would make a move without any restraint, and that military troop would be eradicated. However, Clyde didn't issue any order. It would be even more troublesome if he killed these soldiers because that would only attract further investigation. Clyde quickly made his preparations. The hotel that had received his huge rent was very sincere. An attendant continuously tangled with the soldiers who wanted to search this place, stalling to give Clyde enough time. Clyde first carried the aristocrat ladies and hid them in the big wardrobe before locking it up. These ladies didn't dare to move randomly. They were feeling very conflicted in their hearts. If they made the sound, they might be discovered and saved, but the reputations of the patrolling troops were not good. If by chance they saw them in their current appearances, it would certainly be even more tragic than their current hopeful situation. Now, they were just being dominated by a single person, nothing more. However, if the patrolling troops discovered them, they would be dominated by a group of people. There was no third choice. Thus, the aristocrat ladies chose to cooperate with Clyde and let him hide them in the wardrobe and lock them up. There were quite a few large wardrobes in the room, just enough to hide these ladies. Princess Alyssa didn't need to hide. After Clyde threw off his clothing, leaving only underpants, he climbed into the big bed. Then, he extinguished the magic lamp that illuminated the room and hugged Princess Alyssa and her two girlfriends. Princess Alyssa and the others were so scared that they trembled, thinking Clyde was unable to restrain himself and wanted to do that to them. When the two sides came into intimate contact, Princess Alyssa and others noticed that Clyde had already removing his clothing, allowing their naked bodies to touch. Clyde held Anna on the left and held Sivia on the right. Princess Alyssa was bent over in front of him. After they were covered by a quilt in this position, looking from a distance, it looked exactly like they were in the process of doing a wicked deed. At that time, the patrolling troops forcibly burst in only to see several figures on the big bed. A handsome youth held three beauties, seemingly in the middle of doing a bad deed. Because of the dim illumination, the patrolling troops couldn't clearly see that the beauties Clyde was holding were Princess Alyssa and others. When Captain Brain, who had entered first, wanted to give the orders to search the room and make the men and women on the bed get up, he saw Light Church's priest attire resting beside the bed. His complexion immediately changed greatly. Before Clyde had come, he had not changed his clothing, and he had still been wearing Light Church's formal attire, leading to this situation. "This captain, do you have any matters?" "Mistake, we entered the wrong room. Sorry to disturb you. We'll leave immediately." Clyde was calm and composed, not nervous at all. Captain Brain, however, profusely sweated. He had never expected to encounter a Light Church member pursuing recreational activities here. This was so tragic, and he definitely couldn't report it. The higher-ups of Light Church engaged in such matters a lot. Even if he reported it, it would be declared heresy. In addition, the one who had reported it would be directly captured by the Inquisition and burned to death while being declared guilty. In fact, Clyde's literal word could spell his fate. Is it truly a mistake? Captain Brain, as I see it, you don't seem to have made a mistake. Recently, the Inquisition. Your Excellency, we didn't see anything. You can continue. I will maintain my secrecy. I will warn other patrolling troops too. Please believe me. I am a believer of Light Goddess. I can feel your sincerity. Then, I will not see my unexpected guests out. Rest well. We will scram immediately." Although Captain Brain was envious of this man's luck with women, he knew very well that he had no such blessing and shouldn't stay here any longer. He quickly retreated with his subordinates. He would never speak out this matter, otherwise, he might be executed and burned at the stake, truly a miserable way to end. The entire patrolling troops quickly left, saving themselves. If they had approached a bit closer, then those corpse kings and the corpse emperor hiding in the dark corner would have wiped them out without waiting for Clyde's orders to attack. Thus, they could consider themselves truly fortunate. After the patrolling troops left, when Clyde wished to get up, he discovered that Princess Alyssa and the others already couldn't control themselves. Under the effect of the condiment, they were twisting around, clutching at him. In this state, he couldn't release them. If he were to take off the blindfolds of Princess Alyssa and others, he would be able to see their yearning and bashful expressions. "Princess Alyssa, I can help you all, but you all have to maintain secrecy. This will be a secret between us." Princess Alyssa had long been tortured by her instincts and would soon lose control. She meekly nodded her head and closed her eyes, handing herself over to Clyde's care. On the other side, Anna and Sivia also did the same. They nodded their heads and expressed willingness to accede to Clyde's arrangements. Only such a man could provide him with pleasure. Since they had already agreed, Clyde also no longer pretended to be a gentleman. He opened the wardrobes and carried those ladies to the big bed, then lowered his head to kiss them all. After a long night, when the morning sun finally illuminated the bedroom, beautiful scenery could be seen on the big bed. There were snowy white charming bodies everywhere. Clyde got up from the midst of beauties. Beside him, Sivia, Anna and Princess Alyssa watched Clyde bitter expressions. Seemingly, they were discontented with this gentleman. Clyde hadn't taken the last step. He had simply caressed and kissed their entire bodies, lowering their internal frustrations and heat, nothing more. That condiment hadn't contained a large amount of that special drug. They would be fine as long as they persisted for some time. However, kissing their entire bodies had truly been too wicked. Heaven knew how many times Princess Alyssa and the others had almost reached their peaks before being denying it. If it were not for the small balls sealing their ability to speak, they might have already begged Clyde to give them real happiness. Clyde's attempt at maintaining their purity had simply been pure torture. "Princess Alyssa, I offended you greatly yesterday." Why are you crying?" "I don't have any ill intentions." Can it be that you don't want to take responsibility? Although you didn't take the last step, you have already seen our everything." Princess Alyssa shed tears of shame. It seemed that she wanted Clyde to take responsibility for his actions. In the past, she didn't have any good opinions about Light Church, but she had a good impression of Clyde. On the other hand, Anna and Sivia also had the same expressions. Seemingly, they wanted Clyde to take responsibility. Basically, the other ladies on the bed had also experienced the same. Taking responsibility for so many people, it seemed very difficult. Those ladies were still asleep, and unlike Princess Alyssa, Anna and Sivia who were freed from the black blindfolds and the small balls, they were still wearing all the erotic lingerie they'd come in. "We will obey your arrangements. For instance," Anna and Sivia whispered in the ears of Princess Alyssa, then the complexions of three women became red. Like they had made some kind of decision, they simultaneously lowered their bodies. Anna and Sivia then used their teeth to gently pull down Clyde's boxer shorts that were in the way, and Princess Alyssa faced that standing, erect, ferocious thing. She turned redder, and slowly lowering her head, she used her little mouth to contain the wicked thing. Gently swishing her tongue, she provided vibrations that made Clyde moan. Clyde was stimulated. In the past, when he had been with Princess Saras and Valkyrie Cynthia, the two had not been so open. Princess Alyssa and these aristocrat ladies, although they weren't experienced in human affairs, actually knew a lot. After seeing Clyde had no objections, Anna and Sivia also got down on his left and right with red faces and stuck out their tongues, making Clyde experience 3 times the joy. Clyde was not a person of virtue. He didn't want to refuse this special service at his doorstep. He reached out and pressed Princess Alyssa and the others' heads in response. The other aristocrat ladies were still blindfolded and didn't see this wicked scene of Princess Alyssa, Anna and Sivia serving a man. The 3 people together gave Clyde a wicked service. Chapter 63. Returning to Steinbeck Fief, Part 1, you are listening at NovelFull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, Adrian Empire's capital Samuel City. Because of the assassination attempts, the entire city was under martial law. Princess Alyssa and her close girlfriends Anna and Sivia, as well as those other ladies who had gone missing during the gentry banquet held by Prince Joseph, smoothly returned to the palace the next day. They were escorted back by the people of Light Church. As for the concrete details, they didn't speak of them. Clyde, you have to take responsibility. We already. Princess Alyssa, I will think of a way. You don't need to care about that Douglas clan. As long as they are human beings, they are of no threat to me. After Clyde sent Princess Alyssa and the others back, he finally relaxed. Recalling the insane matters of this morning, he felt his brow furrow. He had almost been unable to endure and been forced to directly punish them thoroughly. That special service was truly very hard to withstand. Just as he had been about to erupt, Alyssa Princess had felt shy and moved away. Fortunately, her close girlfriend Anna had timely replaced Princess Alyssa and had that special experience. With Anna taking the lead to set the example, the developments afterward were like opening Pandora's box. Princess Alyssa and Sivia, as well as those ladies of illustrious aristocrat families, had basically all experienced that special pleasure. Although they were still virgins for now, after that special experience, they had, in fact, all already turned into his women. As an evil god with the background of a great old one, his physical power was unusually abundant, far above these beautiful girls of the human race. Even after all these beauties had been physically paralyzed by sheer orgasmic pleasure, he had still had a lot of energy left to squander. In the end, Clyde had gone to buy clothes, and after untying their bindings, he had personally stroked their bodies while putting the clothes on them. At that time, Princess Alyssa and the others had already tacitly approved of and accepted their new reality, letting Clyde put on everything from their new bras and panties to silk stockings and outer robes on them. Clyde thoroughly enjoyed this dressing project without a hitch. For Clyde, his experience of that time was simply paradise. Princess Alyssa and the others took turns to give him special services. After the cloud and rain, their lips had been left with a special mark in addition to his white liquid. Seemingly, he had marked them as his own possessions through his powers. Later, Clyde was also not polite, and he had kissed and caressed them simultaneously, thoroughly bullying Princess Alyssa and the others. After sending off Princess Alyssa and the others, Clyde immediately returned to Bradley Cathedral to discuss with the church officials. After he used the key to open his room, an amorous scene appeared before him. He saw various kinds of girls' clothing from bras, panties and silk stockings to outerwear scattered on the woolen carpet. According to their measurements, he could determine that they belonged to Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany for sure. The two saintesses seemed to have a habit of sleeping without any clothing, truly an inviting sight. Those two snowy white works of art like bodies hugged each other in a completely unguarded state. Originally, a quilt seemed to have covered them, but he didn't know whether Maria or Tiffany had bad sleeping postures, but the quilt had been kicked away in the night, allowing Clyde to see the scene of their embrace. Clyde truly wished to cuddle with them. Fortunately, Clyde knew them relatively well. He knew that these two weren't lilies, otherwise, he would have generously turned away so as to not disturb their intimate time. Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany had no guards up against Clyde. They had clearly known that Clyde had a key, but they still hadn't locked the door, and after Clyde had returned, he had immediately seen this amorous scene. Probably because the sound of door opening was too loud, Maria and Tiffany woke up with a start. When they saw Clyde, their faces instantly became bright red, and as if they were worried that he would misunderstand, they immediately separated before realizing their bare states and covering their secret parts. Clyde had already been satisfied by Princess Alyssa and the others, so he was not interested in these two saintesses for the time being. Otherwise, he might have slept together with Maria and Tiffany beneath the gentle morning sun. I disturbed you too. How about I leave first, and you two can continue? Lord Clyde, wait, you misunderstood. I don't have such a relationship with Tiffany. Lord Clyde, don't let your imagination run wild. There is truly nothing between us. It's okay. I was just joking, nothing more. You two should change first, otherwise, I will not be able to explain this scene to Bishop Nichols. Clyde accepted the explanations of Maria and Tiffany. Then, like a gentleman, he turned around and left. After closing the door, he helped them keep watch outside. In a while, the two saintesses finally changed into their formal priest attires of Light Church and emerged. Their complexions were still slightly red. Clearly, they had recalled the matter of Clyde seeing them completely bare while changing. Lord Clyde, just now, did you see everything? It was unintentional. I can't say that I didn't see. However, there is no need to worry. I will never tell anyone else. This will be a secret between us. Lord Clyde, you misunderstood. We have no other meanings. We just wanted to ask about whose figure did you think was better. The question raised by Tiffany placed Clyde in a dilemma. As he saw it, only an immature kid would make a choice. All adults had a standard solution to such a problem, which was to pretend to become an idiot. After giving a series of ambiguous answers to them, Clyde finally saw Bishop Nichols. Seeing the bishop, the two saintesses turned around and went to other places to busy themselves. Clyde and the bishop also left to a secret place. Your Excellency Clyde, I have already asked Archbishop Andrew. In the future, Needham Plains will be declared as a cursed land. At that time, as long as your Steinbeck fief expresses the intention to buy it up, Andrew Empire will immediately shake hands with you. I have troubled you, Bishop Nichols. After this is achieved, I will reward you again. Oh, that's right, I wanted to ask. If I want. Your Excellency Clyde, your appetite is too. In the matter of Princess Alyssa's engagement with the Douglas clan, our Light Church cannot help, but if you have a fief and an army, you can directly deal with this according to the way you like the most. Like Next.Door Clark Alliance, you can directly use military force to snatch a person. Bishop Nichols, you are asking me. Your Excellency Clyde, I am not saying anything. Light Church doesn't participate in political affairs, and this is just a small branch of Light Church. That's all. As for who controls this place, either Andrew Empire or your Excellency, you can decide on your own. It has nothing to do with us. Crafty and cunning Bishop Nichols didn't even bat an eyelid as he gave Clyde his answer, hinting that he could use force to end Adrian Empire. When the moment came, Princess Alyssa and the others would be under the control of the winner as people of a vanquished nation. This method of resolving things was the usual method of Clark Alliance. It was oversimplified and crude, but there was no need to worry too much. The Adrian Empire's imperial family was too stingy. This branch of Light Church couldn't scoop out too many delicacies. Bishop Nichols had already had the intention of replacing the ruling party, wanting to let a new empire to replace the Adrian Empire. On the surface, Clyde and Bishop Nicholas were friendly, but in fact, each had evil intentions and were calculating against the other. The number of current residents of Steinbeck fief was just several tens of thousands. Attacking Adrian Empire that had a population of several million was no different from throwing an egg against a rock. The gaps in population was too big. Unless Clyde showed his true form and directly used demonic creatures to attack, there was no way it could succeed. In addition, Bishop Nichols had already revealed that Light Church would neither support nor interfere in this matter. During his trip to Andrew Empire's capital Samuel City, his gains had been truly great. Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany brought back a large number of priestesses and clergywomen to assume stations in Steinbeck fief's soon-to-be cathedral. In addition, because Clyde had passed their tests, these two saintesses felt he was reliable and had chosen priestesses and clergywomen with very high attractiveness indexes. All of them looked seductive. As for the matter of Princess Alyssa, he didn't need to worry too much. Her engagement with the Douglas clan didn't need her to get married immediately. Clyde had plenty of time to prepare and consider whether to overthrow Adrian Empire or wipe out the Douglas clan. A peaceful negotiation was very unlikely. The Douglas clan was the foremost aristocratic family of Adrian Empire. Its status was very high within the empire, reaching the extent that they could ignore imperial rules. However, they still gave face to Light Church, so the two sides didn't interfere in each other's matters. Lord Clyde, we are already at the city wall of Samuel City. Did Bishop Nichols discuss any bad things with you? That old man is crafty. You should be careful when dealing with him. If you don't, you will suffer unexpected financial losses. On the carriage, Clyde was somewhat embarrassed while looking at Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany and slightly nodded his head to acknowledge their words. Merely, those words were a bit too late. He had already been scammed. Steinbeck Fief was no different from the time when Clyde left. Nevertheless, the territory that had originally lain in waste without any signs of human habitation, because of the influx of several 10,000s of residents, began to look somewhat humane. In the vicinity of Stanley City, the wasteland was already being reclaimed for farmland, and Stanley City was setting up the necessary facilities for a functional city. The magical creatures wandering around nearby had already been driven out by the bloodkin familiars summoned by Lucifer. In addition, there was an undead legion, guarding the territory in secret. As for the neighboring nations, although they had not given up on capturing the witch Ista, they didn't rashly attack. All were waiting for someone else to lose patience first and become the vanguard to test the waters that seemed suspiciously deep after several failed expeditions. Princess Saras and Princess Natalie welcomed Clyde at the entrance of the palace. It was daytime, and Lucifer didn't like the sunlight, so she was probably still sleeping in the palace. The ancient demon King Andrisno was for similar reasons in the Imperial Library. Meanwhile, the witch Ista and Princess Sigrid were hidden in a secret experiment area. Clyde, you are finally back. I heard the next-door Needham Plains were declared a cursed land by the Light Church. Adrian Empire has dispatched several special envoys to ask whether we want to take it over and also said that they would exempt the taxes for that place for 1 year. I have been waiting for your return to make the decision and haven't yet replied to them. Bishop Nichols and others' efficiency is truly fast. Worthy of taking. Saras, it's fine. We'll take it over. There is yet another thing. The construction of Light Church has already started. Merely, we lack skilled craftsmen and the raw materials. The neighboring nations seem to have made an agreement and sealed our borders to prevent traveling merchants from trading with us to force us to pay double the price to them. Those guys are truly asking for a spanking. Princess Saras, I will take care of this matter, we won't need to spend a penny. Chapter 64. Returning to Steinbeck Fief, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, Steinbeck Fief Central Area, Stanley City's Palace Area. Clyde discussed with Lucifer and Princess Saras about the new situation that the Fief faced. Meanwhile, the two saintesses, Punishment Saintess Tiffany and Light Saintess Maria, had already gone to inspect the rate of progress on the cathedral with the priestesses and clergywomen whom they had invited. Those several nations of Clark Alliance around Steinbeck Fief such as Adelaide Kingdom, Cruft Kingdom, Cromwell Kingdom, and Franconia Empire were all militant nations, especially Franconia Empire. In Clark Alliance, its overall strength was on the level of the Augusta Empire that had routed Adrian Empire. In other words, it was a superpower. Among the surrounding nations, Clyde didn't consider Cruft Kingdom an opponent. Not long ago, it had already suffered a big loss and had also been unable to secure further military expenditures. In addition, a prince had been lost, and Princess Natalie had defected to Steinbeck Fief. Even if they wanted to attack Steinbeck Fief, they didn't have the ability. Among the other nations, Franconia Empire also didn't have any plans to take the initiative to attack. After all, Steinbeck Fief was still a land lying in waste and lacked valuable resources. If it were not for witch Ista hiding here, Franconia Empire wouldn't have even marked this region on the map. The main target of Franconia Empire was Adrian Empire, but they had never found a suitable chance to attack. Although Adrian Empire had suffered a crushing defeat against Augusta Empire, Pure White Empire, Winifred Empire's Princess Claudia's army had successfully supported Adrian Empire. With 50,000 soldiers, they had warded off the joint offense of over 500,000 soldiers originating from multiple nations of Clark Alliance. After over 500,000 joint forces of Clark Alliance had continuously attacked for several days, they had withdrawn their troops as resources had grown scarce. Even after losing over 10,000 people, they had still been unable to break through Pure White Princess Claudia's line of defense. Extreme Knight Princess Ophelia, who was one of the only generals who could prove a match for Princess Claudia, had already long recalled her troops. She didn't participate in this battle, indirectly leading to the defeat of Clark Alliance, because she had already foreseen the outcome. Franconia Empire had chosen a wait-and-see approach. They had been waiting for Winifred Empire's army to withdraw. At that time, they would look for a suitable gap to attack Andrew Empire. Steinbeck fief was not important in their eyes. Without which Ista, Steinbeck fief wouldn't have even entered their eyes. At present, the main opponents of Steinbeck fief were Adelaide Kingdom and Cromwell Principality. These two nations led the trade blockade battle against Steinbeck fief. Moreover, they were intensifying their preparations for war against this fief. Furthermore, there was still a good chance that Franconia Empire was secretly instigating their efforts from the dark, wanting to use these two nations to test the actual situation of Steinbeck fief. If this attack succeeded, then Franconia Empire would use the gap that would be presented to later attack Adrian Empire. If the attack failed, they would figure out Steinbeck fief's defenses without truly suffering any losses. After all, they were just manipulating the other two kingdoms behind the scenes, nothing more. They wouldn't need to waste their military strength, and they only needed to give some basic funding and equipment support to Adelaide Kingdom and Cromwell Principality. According to our investigations, Adelaide Kingdom has already assembled troops. Likewise, Cromwell Principality has also already assembled an army of over 100,000 troops, and both nations have stationed significant numbers at our borders. They both seem to have moved out the entirety of their forces. These two fellows, they still don't know that they are being used as a tool to attack. How much information on these two nations has been collected? Adelaide Kingdom's elite troops are mainly pikemen. As for Cromwell Principality, they don't have any special branches. Their main force is their infantry. The current suzerain, Duke Crend, is a militant fellow who has always wanted to annex Steinbeck fief and expand his territory, because if his territory grows just a bit larger, then it will directly advance from being a mere principality to a kingdom. Then, he will be given priority in who needs to learn a lesson. That fellow actually want to use our fief as a stepping stone to advance his nation. In the secret room of Stanley City's palace, after listening to Princess Sarasa's report, a hint of coldness flashed through Clyde's eyes. In the early stages of the territory, he had originally wanted to keep a low profile for a period of time while slowly developing. However, the other party seemed to not want to give him the opportunity to be low-key. In the current situation, not counterattacking won't do. Cromwell Principality and Adelaide Kingdom had already sealed the borderline of Steinbeck fief and stopped all frontier trade. Without trade, the construction of Light Church's cathedral wouldn't be completed in time because a large number of raw materials had to be shipped from outside. The blockade at the border was very troublesome. If the construction were not completed in time, Saintess Maria and Saintess Tiffany would have to return to Light Church's headquarters to report back. In addition, the personnel of Light Church that would be appointed to Steinbeck fief would also have to be re-evaluated. In order to resolve the issue of the dearth of materials for cathedral construction, Clyde had to launch a war against Cromwell Principality in Adelaide Kingdom in order to force them to open the borders using military force. Nevertheless, they couldn't expect any help from Adrian Empire, their mother empire. After they had passed Steinbeck fief to Clyde, they hadn't cared about anything and also hadn't provided any support. The path connecting Adrian Empire and Steinbeck Fief had fallen into disuse for many years and was not suitable for transportation. It was almost impossible for trade to pass through the border shared with Adrian Empire. Big brother Clyde, I have a matter to settle with Andrisno. You and big sister Saras can keep discussing. By the way, the room in the back has a bed. You can use it at any time. Lucifer, what strange things does this girl think of all day long? The secret room was illuminated by the red candles. That red candlelight created an unusually ambiguous atmosphere. Now, Clyde sat on the throne, and his younger sister had already left while pretending that she had something secret to discuss with the ancient demon king Andrisno. However, just before parting, Lucifer mischievously gave Clyde a few hints, and her eyes were filled with encouragement. The atmosphere within the secret room was truly ambiguous. Under Lucifer's arrangements, the decoration of this room was similar to those special appeal rooms often used by lovers. The window's curtains were tightly closed, making this room rely on just the light emitted by a few red candles for illumination. The maid-servants in the room were all in a completely bare state with red leather collars around their fair necks that appeared especially conspicuous. They were already accustomed to this state and bore it without any signs of nervousness. Looking at them, Clyde thought about Princess Alyssa and the others he had bullied before. When he looked at these maid-servants once more, he couldn't help but feel the ambiguous aftertaste of that time. The faces of these maid-servants were slightly red, but they didn't evade or cover their soft and elastic snowy white marked with the exclusive magic seals of Steinbeck Fief from his gaze. These magic seals proved that Clyde owned them. Therefore, being shy in front of Clyde was useless, they were his. Lord Clyde, do what you want. No problem. This room is soundproof, so you can do whatever you desire here. No one else will know. Princess Saras, your attire is very dangerous. That's fine. With Lord Clyde here, there will be no danger. After Lucifer's departure, Princess Saras naturally undressed herself with the help of the maid-servants. From the start, she had never worn anything inside and was in a completely bare state. Within the palace, bras and panties were basically non-existent. After taking off her clothing, Princess Saras put on a black-colored cat-ear headband and knelt in front of Clyde, revealing that she had been wearing a red leather collar around her neck this entire time. Princess Saras then placed her hands behind her back and ordered the waiting maid-servants to use a red rope to tie them up, delivering herself to Clyde's doorstep. In any case, they had already slept together before with only the last step remaining. The face of Princess Saras was slightly red, but she was not that embarrassed. After all, Clyde had already seen her everything, she already had no secrets in front of Clyde. In the past few days while Clyde had been absent, Princess Saras must have learned various kinds of seduction techniques from Lucifer, including how to seduce her master. She had devoutly practiced them since in truth, she desired for him to fill the hidden desire that she concealed whenever she had to act like a proper official. After the matter of bullying Princess Alyssa and the others, Clyde was no longer so serious. He had overcome his previous thinking about propriety and respect. This was a different world, and he didn't need to restrain himself with the rules of his previous world. After thinking this, Clyde made Princess Saras sit above his legs and skillfully pulled that iron chain attached to the collar around her, making Princess Saras move close to him. Reaching up to lick his chin, she meekly mewed while gazing at his dark eyes. Saras, you need to be punished properly for this. No problem, Lord Clyde. I am in your hands. Please teach me. Since Princess Saras subtly announced her consent, Clyde also didn't hesitate. He gently but forcefully pulled the iron chain to force her head up and kissed her lips. Then, prying open the other party's teeth, he slipped his tongue in for a French kiss. Using his powerful tongue, he overpowered her soft and supple tongue that seemed to twist around his own. Their salivas mixed as she melted into his arms. Although Clyde hadn't taken off his clothing, he could still feel the softness of Princess Saras's chest pressed against him. Although it was soft like a pillow, 2 hard nubs poked into his broad chest, exciting him even further. Clyde used his one hand to hold the iron chain and restrict her movements while using the other hand to explore Princess Saras's back. While roaming across her smooth back, his hand explored the secrets of her body, registering every slight tremor as he found one of her pleasure points. Upon seeing this, the other maids didn't escape but gathered together as if they had made an agreement to serve their master or perhaps even attract his attention so they too could receive some pleasure. 2 maids took off Clyde's war boots and gave his feet a massage while another maid massaged the arm he was using to hold Saras's chain. Clyde felt that these maids had definitely been taught well by Lucifer. Their serving methods were too professional. The secret room was dimly lit, and along with the tightly closed window curtain, this place became a secret area for erotic acts. Clyde could do whatever he wanted. The other maids without any tasks knelt on both sides of the throne, waiting for Clyde's arrangements with their secret parts proudly on display. "Lord Clyde, I've already consolidated the troops. Should we set out?" Natalie, wait a moment. I will come out soon." Just when Clyde was about to place Princess Saras on the bed and preparing to enjoy this beauty, Princess Natalie's voice came from outside the curtain. Because the curtain was tightly closed, Princess Natalie was unable to see the amorous scene at the side of the throne. Clyde kissed Princess Saras a few more times and left. In any case, Princess Saras was already in his hands. He could do anything he wanted whenever he wanted. He didn't need to be so hasty now. "Saras, I am going to resolve the issue of Cromwell Principality. Wash neatly and wait for my return on the bed. Surprise me." Struggling to conceal her disappointment, Saras gasped and then mumbled, "Don't hurt the common people, would you?" "I will try my best." Chapter 65. The troops with large disparity encounter in Peacock Forest area, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, outside Steinbeck Fief, Peacock Forest area. This place was the joint border of Steinbeck Fief and Cromwell Principality. Because of magical beasts forcibly occupying this place over a long period of time, average hunters didn't dare to easily hunt here. For a long time, this area had grown wild. In this different world, there were very few magicians among the human race. Generally, average adventurers and mercenaries dared to deal with just low-leveled magical beasts and wild beasts. If they encountered mid-leveled or high-leveled magical beasts, they would be powerless to even resist. As for average hunters, they only dared to hunt normal wild beasts, nothing more. They couldn't afford to provoke any magical beasts. Clyde together with Princess Natalie and roughly 5,000 militia were rushing into the Peacock Forest area. Princess Natalie looked serious, feeling the war situation was very thorny. Among the female companions around Clyde, at present, only Princess Natalie could be called the military leader. This blood-red-haired beauty wearing a silver armor looked especially conspicuous in the midst of this army. "Princess Natalie, no need to be so tense, you have already commanded in so many wars before, just acting like usual is fine." "Lord Clyde, with the disparity in troops this time, I fear, we cannot keep up for a long time." Princess Natalie barely smiled hearing the comfort of Clyde. Cromwell Principality had no less than 100,000 troops this time. In terms of numbers, they were at least 20 times more than their side. In addition, the equipment of the two sides was also of different grades. The equipment of Steinbeck Fief's militia was just simple and crude plate armor and spear, moreover, many were untrained. The former suzerains of independent cities, even after joining Steinbeck Fief, they assumed importance by massing troops and refused to hand over their troops to Princess Saras, vainly keeping their power. Their troops were armed, but Princess Natalie had no choice, she could only recruit additional soldiers. These over 5,000 people were new recruits. However, those suzerains' wish was also not achieved. They originally wanted to rely on the troops in their hands to discuss terms. Princess Saras spoke with them, but Lucifer beside her didn't speak at all. She just observed secretly for a while and made Princess Saras allow those suzerains and their army to enter the fief, and even choose the place they wanted to stay themselves. Those suzerains naively thought that Princess Saras was fooled and entered Steinbeck fief with all their belongings. On the same night, the place chosen by those suzerains were raided by bloodkin familiars, creating a bloodbath. Those independent cities' suzerains didn't see this coming even in their dream. Everything was a trap set up by Lucifer, especially to lure them to bring all their belongings into Steinbeck fief before making a move. First, their cities were burned and everywhere was infested by undeads, later they were attacked and their blood was sucked dry by the bloodkin familiars, and they were also turned into bloodkin servants. Money, all money is there, let us go, we won't dare next time. Next time. There is no next time. Big Sister Saras is kind-hearted, but you all didn't listen to her at that time, now, you all have no choice. You all are just in time to deliver military expenses to Big Brother Clyde. Lucifer walked into the estate with a lot of bloodkin familiars around her. Those big and tall independent cities' suzerains were so scared of this Lolita that they pissed their pants. They didn't even have the courage to take up arms. The soldiers inside and outside the estate were already killed by bloodkin familiars. The army in their hands was all wiped out here. Don't blame me. You all chose this graveyard, farewell forever. God, please. Ah. Those unfortunate suzerains didn't even have the time to pray the gods for forgiveness. They were swarmed by blood wolves and turned into corpses. The scene was very bloody, incomplete limbs were flying all around. Lucifer didn't even look at this scene and left. All the belongings of these suzerains were already taken away by the bloodkin familiars under her. What a sham, you all basically don't believe in light God, now you know repentance. Your Majesty the Queen, should we also strip off their equipment and pass them on to Lord Evil God? Don't bother, how can I pass bloody equipment to Big Brother Clyde? Because of the large disparity in strength, the independent suzerains were quickly wiped out by bloodkin familiars. When the sun rose the next morning, other than bloodstains, there was nothing here. Those bloodstains proved that they once existed here. All the belongings of independent suzerains were naturally collected by Lucifer and passed them to Clyde in the frontline as military funds. Clyde didn't know the source of this military fund, but he also didn't ask Lucifer. Although there were just over 5,000 people in the army of Steinbeck fief, in the rear, there still were over 10,000 specters and undeads supporting from the dark. The ancient demon king Andrisno was in the rear command of undeads to help transport army provisions, moreover, to dispatch specters to the frontline to investigate. Behind the armed forces of Steinbeck fief, there was a strange scene. Undeads along with skeleton warriors were pulling carriages, helping human soldiers transport supplies. These demonic creatures wouldn't temporarily enter the war, they were merely supporting. Only if the frontline collapsed, they would enter the battle. Relying on the investigation report of specters, before arriving at the battlefront, Clyde already knew the place where Cromwell Principality's troops were stationed. In the comparatively open plain of Peacock Forest area, they had built forts. The commander of Cromwell Principality's troops was Eric, the son of Cromwell Principality's suzerain Duke Krend. Like father, that fellow was also militant and believed in military force. Actually, the real military strength of Cromwell Principality was just over 50,000 soldiers. With the addition of hired over 20,000 mercenaries and the remaining over 30,000 rear service personnel responsible to transport the supplies, they added up to over 100,000 troops. As for Clyde's side, he actually also had over 100,000 soldiers. Among them, 5,000 were militia and over 100,000 were undeads under the guise of rear service personnel. The combat power of these specters, skeleton warriors and zombies was a lot stronger than these 5,000 militias. The soldiers under Clyde arrived at a small hill, they could see the forts of Cromwell Principality from here. Like the investigation report of the Scepters, Cromwell Principality's forts were divided into two parts. The Grey Fort was the place where the army was stationed, and Eric commanded these over 50,000 soldiers from here. The other Evan Fort was where the hired mercenaries were stationed. Over 20,000 mercenaries were hired to take part in this war. The remaining 30,000 rear service personnel were not in these forts, they were in the rear area. The soldiers of Cromwell Principality were infantries equipped with a complete set of armor. All of them looked like lumps of steels. Compared to the militia of Steinbeck Fief, the gap in equipment grade was clear. Clyde turned around to look and discovered that many militia were trembling. It seemed they had never seen such a big battlefield and were badly scared. If it were not for over 100,000 undead troops behind, many might have already fled, becoming the army deserter. What are you all afraid of? Could it be that those demonic creatures behind aren't more terrifying? Now, you all have two choices: join them in the rear or fight like humans. Under Clyde's warning, the militia of Steinbeck Fief recovered a lot of morale with difficulty. In any case, since they were dead regardless of whether they advanced or retreated, wouldn't it be better to die in the hands of other human beings? Like that, they would at least die as a human. If they were killed by those undeads, then it would be even more tragic. After understanding this point, the weapons in their hands no longer trembled like before. Lord Clyde, I don't have any confidence to win, the other side's number is too much. No, Natalie, we still have a stratagem which ensures success. They have a burden, but we don't have any fear of disturbance in the rear. After seeing the other side's military camp, Clyde considered for a short while, then ordered the entire army to stay here and wait for the day to turn dark to attack the military camp of Cromwell Principality at night. With their manpower, if they don't carry out a surprise attack and wait for the other side to completely consolidate their troops, then they might not have any chance. Princess Natalie had no objection. She also could only think of a surprise attack and harassing tactics. With such a difference in numbers, they could only play like this. In the command area of Grey Fort, Eric, the commander of Cromwell Principality's army, was having a banquet with his subordinates, trusted aides and military officers, enjoying good wine and delicacies. He basically didn't attach any importance to Steinbeck Fief, that small fief with just 5,000 or so militia. He came on this expedition just to be far away from his father Duke Kren's restriction so he could mess around as he pleased. The banquet was quite chaotic. Just like a carnival, there were bare-chested men everywhere who were drinking wine while enjoying maids. At the banquet, there were many slaves. Those slaves wore nothing, were in a bare state with an iron collar around their neck. An iron chain was attached to their iron collar, and the other end was tied to a chair or a table. The maids with bright red faces were bending over, giving influential officials various kinds of wicked erotic services. They had an exclusive slave mark on their body and could only let these influential officials do whatever they liked. Basically, the nations of Clark Alliance all practiced slavery. This kind of thing was considered normal. The influential officials of those nations were also already accustomed to this. Eric was drinking wine while playing dirty tricks on a maid in front of him. That beautiful maid was kneeling in front of him and using her elastic and soft plump bosom to clamp that standing erect crime tool while rubbing up and down. Her face was already covered with a strange white substance, and she was using a charming expression to curry favor with her master. Lord Eric, the troops of Steinbeck Fief seem to have arrived at that hill, should we? What's there to fear, just 5,000 or so people? Let them live for one more day. Tomorrow, make those mercenaries attack, we will just watch the play. In any case, we have spent money, those mercenaries will definitely spare no effort. Lord Eric, I heard the commander of Steinbeck Fief's army is a red-haired beauty. Red-haired beauty, that's just right, capture her alive as spoils of war. Eric and the military officers enjoyed wine while calculating what to plunder from Steinbeck Fief. No one noticed that there were many specters lurking in this banquet site, coldly monitoring them. They reported everything to ancient demon King Andrisno far away, and she reported it to Clyde. Chapter 66. The Troops with Large Disparity Encounter in Peacock Forest, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, outside Steinbeck Fief, Peacock Forest area. Clyde led over 5,000 militia of Steinbeck Fief to confront the over 100,000 troops of the invading Cromwell Principality. However, Duke Cren's son, Eric, the commander of Cromwell Principality's troops, never attached any importance to Steinbeck Fief's expeditionary army. There was a large disparity between the number of the two sides' troops. Cromwell Principality truly had only 50,000 or so soldiers. Among them, over 20,000 were hired mercenaries, and the remaining 20,000 or so were rear-service personnel responsible for transporting supplies. Compared to Steinbeck Fief, they had over 10 times as many soldiers, and in addition, their equipment was also of a higher grade. From the beginning, Cromwell Principality held absolute superiority. Those 50,000 troops under the command of Eric were stationed at Grey Fort. Those 20,000 mercenaries were stationed at the neighboring Evan Fort. Clyde stood on a hill beside the beautiful red-haired knight, Princess Natalie, and the ancient demon King Andrisno, who wore black Gothic Lolita attire. Other than Lucifer, Andrisno was the only Lolita of a different race on his side, with two long silver ponytails reaching almost to her hips, blood-red eyes, two black horns on her head, and barely visible phantom demon wings on her back. In order to differentiate the two, the Gothic Lolita outfit of Andrisno had a pattern of demonic wings drawn on it. As for Lucifer's, a bloodkin's crest was drawn. Both of them were silver-haired Lolita. Looking from a distance, it was very easy to mix them up. For Clyde, the best and simplest method of distinction was their cup size. He could determine it at a glance. Lord Clyde, everything is already prepared according to your directions. Let's attack. No, wait for that fool Eric to get drunk first. Is everything clear? Yes, my lord. The position is already determined, we're just waiting for a suitable time to launch a surprise attack. While Clyde and Andrisno were discussing operational preparations, Princess Natalie who stood beside them had a subtle peculiar feeling. As a human general, standing at the side of an evil god and an ancient demon king, listening to their discussion to attack the humans' camp, Princess Natalie felt an indescribable criminal guilt, as if she were a traitor to her own kind. Natalie, are you all right? If you are feeling guilty, you don't need to participate. No, Clyde, I am already with you, I cannot turn around and forget everything unless you no longer need me. Natalie, of course I need you. Only you are qualified to be the general of Steinbeck Fief. Even if there are new generals in the future, your standing will not change. Then I'll go to see the battle map and see how the attack has been organized. Clyde's declaration made Princess Natalie turn a little red, necessitating that she make this hasty excuse and escape. Clyde also didn't expose her, merely continuing to discuss the plans with the ancient demon King Andrisno. He clearly knew the current state of Princess Natalie. Since the experience with Princess Alyssa and others, Clyde was released, and no longer had so many misgivings. If a girl was attracted to him, then he also had no objections. Eric's commanding ability could only be regarded as conforming with the norms of society. Speaking a bit frankly, it was dogmatic, rigidly following strategies in the books on the arts of war. It was not like Duke Cren didn't know his son's style, but he wanted to give Eric a chance to refine it with firepower on his own terms. Based on Duke Cren's calculations, no matter how inexperienced Eric was, it was most improbable that he would lose to just 5,000 or so soldiers while having over 100,000 soldiers himself. It was not like there was no one that could properly command on Eric's side. In fact, his younger sister Jenny's commanding ability was clearly superior. However, due to Jenny's profession as an assassin and Duke Cren's regard of men as superior to women, he didn't give any real power to his daughter. Jenny had also joined this expedition, but she was only responsible for those 30,000 or so rear-service personnel, a position with practically no obligations. Although Jenny was an assassin, looked down on by the many who thought she just resorted to sneak attacking to fight, no one could deny her military prowess. A year ago, when Cruft Kingdom had attacked Cromwell Principality to fight for a neutral region, the assault of the army under Princess Natalie had continuously broken through numerous cities of Cromwell Principality. At the critical moment, Jenny had led just over 10,000 soldiers, taking a risk to circle around and carry out a sneak attack, forcing Princess Natalie's over 30,000 troops to hastily retreat, thereby reversing the tide of the war in one fell swoop and eventually leading both sides into peace negotiations. Duke Krend may have been afraid of his daughter stealing the limelight from his son and, thus, suppressed her. In this war, he weakened her military power, only allowing her to command rear-service personnel and other miscellaneous mobs. The combat power of these 30,000 logistics soldiers couldn't hold a candle to even the 20,000 mercenaries, which clearly proved that she wouldn't have any opportunity to intervene in military affairs. At the core area of Grey Fort, Miss Jenny patrolled with her personal guards. She was a black-haired beauty with her hair in a ponytail, wearing the exclusive black skin-tight leather clothing of the assassin profession, which completely outlined her seductive figure. Upon seeing the lax states of the guards, worry unintentionally showed in her beautiful brown eyes. This was too lax. Even if the other side only had 5,000 or so people, they must still be taken seriously. Princess Jenny had a cold expression. For an unknown reason, she vaguely felt like there was a familiar person among Steinbeck Fief's army, but she thought that it was her imagination. Not long ago, when Cruft Kingdom had sent troops to explore Needham Plain, they had suffered a heavy loss. Princess Natalie, her old enemy who was one of the enemy's leaders, had allegedly killed in action there. It was basically impossible for her to be here. Miss Jenny, don't worry. The opposite side has only 5,000 or so people, young Master Eric can definitely resolve this. Is that so? I don't believe a general who brings women to the battlefield can handle any affairs, even if he is my big brother. Jenny didn't hide her contempt towards Eric. In her opinion, this wastrel big brother of hers bringing maids onto the battlefield clearly stated that he had come to play. He didn't have even the slightest vigilance. The two female guards beside Princess Jenny could only keep their mouths shut. In the matters of their masters, they naturally couldn't make any remarks. Jenny came to the command tent. From the gap of the curtain, she could see the debauched scene inside the tent. This tent, which originally should have been used for commanding the battle, was turned into a site to hold a wicked party. Even from afar, she could see bare-chested Eric sitting on a luxurious throne with several stark-naked maids kneeling between his legs with their heads moving up and down. Without seeing everything, she knew what was going on. Other high-ranking military officers were also no better. Various kinds of wicked postures and positions could be found everywhere. All were holding a bare maid, conducting wicked deeds. This place didn't look like a command tent but rather a high-grade area for romantic affairs. Jenny watched for a while with cold eyes before leaving. As a member nation of Clark Alliance, she didn't have much of an opinion on slavery, but she disliked this kind of conduct of not distinguishing between occasions. If Eric wanted to play so much, he should have gone to the red-light district. Doing this on the battlefield is simply. Miss Jenny, the weather tonight is somewhat cold. It was very hot in the daytime, but it has become cold at night. The careless words of a female guard made Princess Jenny notice an anomaly. It was summer now, and the weather was very hot in the daytime, but at night, this Peacock Forest area had become especially cold and had a kind of indescribable gloominess. Usually, wild beasts would have come out at night, but tonight, they had disappeared without a trace as if to avoid something terrifying. Even those arrogant magical beasts had become mute. Peacock Forest area had become terrifyingly quiet. Princess Jenny looked up at the night sky. She didn't know whether it was her imagination, but the night sky of this Peacock Forest area seemed to be covered by a layer of black mist. The stars twinkling all over the sky had also become a lot dimmer, and even the full moon was quickly disappearing. Miss Jenny, the moon vanished. According to ancient books, this is a bad omen. Don't think too much of this, that is an excuse used by Light Church to deceive people. Where is the bad omen? The discussion of the female guards was cut off by Jenny. The sudden disappearance of the moon was truly an unusual sign, but speaking about it now would only undermine the morale of the army. Among the expeditionary army of Cromwell Principality there was no priest of Light Church. It was impossible to interpret the meaning behind the sudden disappearance of the moon, and Jenny didn't try to. When Jenny arrived at the granary area with a restless mental state, she discovered that many guards looked alarmed and were preparing to run away, randomly throwing their weapons away. These logistics personnel weren't a regular army. Their overall quality was no match for the regular army and mercenaries. They would easily flee on the eve of a battle. What's the matter? Are you all thinking of rebelling? Miss Jenny, there are ghosts here. We cannot stay here. Run quickly. What ghosts? This is not Needham Plain. Jenny's gaze followed the direction the logistics personnel were pointing, and her complexion instantly became deathly pale. Clearly, she was frightened, but she forcibly suppressed herself from screaming. From the woods around the granary campsite, burning light blue-colored will wisps flew towards the campsite. But, the most frightening thing was, above those wisps, were the blurred twisted faces of people, which appeared especially frightening in the moonless night. Quick, notify Eric. Jenny originally wanted to notify Eric, but the logistic personnel were so frightened that no one heeded her commands. Human race had always had an innate fear toward ghosts and undead. Even if the regular army faced these wisps, only a few would be able to keep their calm. While Jenny hesitated, the wisps had already entered the granary area and ignited the supply base of Cromwell Principality. Chapter 67. The Terrifying Night in Peacock Forest Area, Part 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, outside Steinbeck Fief, Peacock Forest Area. Cromwell Principality's Expeditionary Army fell into an unprecedentedly wide panic because of the sudden and unexpected changes. Grey Fort, where over 50,000 soldiers were stationed, displayed no obvious anomalies, but Evan Fort, where over 20,000 mercenaries were stationed, was different. These mercenaries had basically all come for money, so once anything unusual emerged on the battlefront, they would easily fall apart due to a lack of morale. At the granary behind Grey Fort, Miss Jenny encountered a thorny matter. A large number of faintly blue-colored wisps attacked the supply center with wisps of flame that spouted off their ephemeral forms. These fire ghosts were very fast. In addition, anyone who came into contact with them would be ignited and swallowed by faint blue fire. Many rear service personnel had no time to escape and spontaneously combusted due to the attacks of these fire ghosts. After their entire bodies were initially burned by the blue flames, they would struggle for a few times in the midst of the wisps of flame before falling to the ground and decomposing into ashes. As the granary caught fire, the resultant soaring blue flame appeared particularly conspicuous in this moonless night, alerting the whole camp of the problem. This place is cursed. I am not doing this. Don't block the way. Quickly get out of the way. Don't run away. Quickly put out the fire. Miss Jenny kept herself sober with great difficulty, refusing to be overwhelmed by fear. However, no one executed her orders. These over 30,000 rear service personnel weren't regular army personnel, so their mental discipline was far inferior compared to that of the regular army. Upon facing this terrifying scene, all fronts quickly collapsed. They couldn't attend nor heed Jenny's orders, they just threw away their helmets and armors to flee all the faster in every direction, not caring the least about the fire within the granary. Under Princess Natalie's campaign, the over 5,000 strong militia of Steinbeck Fief took advantage of the night's cover, bypassing Evan Fort where the panicking mercenaries were stationed to directly strike at the supply center behind Grey Fort. That soaring blue flame, however, was the best guiding coordinate in the moonless night. Those fleeing rear. Service personnel of Cromwell Principality had already lost all fighting spirit, so when they encountered the attacks of Steinbeck Fief's militia, they only symbolically resisted for a short while, before escaping in disorder. In fact, many of them didn't even bother to symbolically resist and simply directly fled. Princess Natalie led the troops to attack the enemy from the front. Her blood-red long hair was especially conspicuous in the middle of the night. With every swing of the sword in her hand, the soldiers of Cromwell Principality closest to her would fall to the ground, completely dead. After she killed several people, no one dared to step forward and block the path of carnage caused by the red-haired war goddess. Upon seeing Princess Natalie approaching, all would automatically retreat and bustle to remove themselves from her way. More than 30,000 defending troops of Cromwell Principality were chased and systematically killed by just over 5,000 Steinbeck Fief's militia. The situation was quite chaotic. Because of the darkness, many defending troops of Cromwell Principality were unable to clearly see the number of attacking enemy troops. This allowed their imagination to work in overdrive, so they mistakenly believed that the other side had more people, directly collapsing any last remnants of their morale. Natalie. Aren't you all ready? Jenny. I am just helping someone do things, nothing more. Jenny had a shocked expression. She was very familiar with Princess Natalie's fiery red long hair. After all, they had come to blows just a year before. At that time, Jenny had used raid tactics and carried out a sneak attack, successfully forcing Princess Natalie to withdraw to her own nation, thereby rewriting the war situation between Cruft Kingdom and Cromwell Principality. However, a year later, just as all things must change with time, when they finally met again, their identities had quietly exchanged. Now, Princess Natalie had become the sneak attacker whereas Jenny had to lead troops to defend the granary. In the past, Princess Natalie had looked down on sneak attack tactics the most, but now, she herself also participated in a sneak attack. This was simply the natural law cycle of growth. Jenny, surrender. They will not make things difficult for you. I can guarantee your safety. Natalie, I haven't lost yet. You have just over 5,000 or so troops. Wait until the reinforcements of Evan Fort and Grey Fort comes. They won't come. Jenny, don't you feel strange? Those fire ghosts only attacked your side, but not the people on my side. After hearing Princess Natalie's reminder, Jenny finally noticed that something was wrong. The fire ghosts attacking the granary area were only attacking the troops of Cromwell Principality. As for the militia of Steinbeck Fief, they indifferently passed them by as if they didn't see them. Usually, ghosts indiscriminately attacked all of human race. Since they didn't attack, there was only one possibility. They were on the same side. Natalie, you. Could it be that you are already? Jenny, I had no choice in the past, but now, I just want to. Let's drop this matter here. With this granary burned down, even if you return, you will not be able to easily explain yourself and will certainly be punished. You might as well follow me. Surrender is impossible. Unfortunately, it is truly impossible because in this life, I will stick with my soldiers to the last moment. Then, don't blame me. In the end, Jenny didn't compromise. Princess Natalie knew that she regarded face as all important and didn't want to admit defeat, and her fierceness was not inspired by any loyalty to her nation. However, Princess Natalie could only face this troublesome matter. A burnt-down granary, this kind of matter needed a person to take the blame. Since Jenny had been responsible for the matters of this granary, if she didn't die in battle and instead managed to return, she would be punished. According to the slavery system of Clark Alliance's Allied Nations, this punishment would lead to the classic punished princesses and other aristocratic Mrs. Fates. Jenny herself also knew what these were, and she would rather die in battle here. Princess Natalie and Miss Jenny quickly engaged in several blows. From a distance, a swordswoman and an assassin, two starkly different professions, could barely be seen as Jenny transforming into a shadow and quickly swaying around Princess Natalie, assumedly looking for a suitable opening to backstab the swordswoman. For the moment, no victory or loss could be determined between these two. Jenny attacked, and her daggers scraped Princess Natalie's armor many times, creating sparks, but she had no way to deal a fatal blow to Princess Natalie. Both sides had fought several times before, so they were quite familiar with each other's attack patterns and routines. It would be very difficult to determine a winner in a short time. As for the other rear service personnel, they didn't care about Miss Jenny and were too busy fleeing in confusion. Princess Natalie hadn't lied. Everything she had said to Jenny had been true. It was impossible for Evan Fort and Grey Fort to send any reinforcements. The over 20,000 mercenaries in Evan Fort were already preparing to withdraw. Upon seeing that the granary in the rear had caught fire, the leaders of the multiple mercenary groups couldn't sit still. If the granary were burned down, there would be no way to ensure their supplies, breaking the promise made before the war where Cromwell Principality had promised to guarantee all the mercenaries rations. However, it now seemed that this promise would be impossible to complete. Cromwell Principality couldn't even resolve the matters of army provisions for their own troops. How could they have the energy to care about them as strangers? Just when they were hesitating, alarmed screams rang out from outside. Then the tone of those screams changed, and it seemed that the owners of these voiced had received a huge fright. "Commander, the other side has made a surprise attack. They have at least 50,000 people." "Impossible. Steinbeck Fief has just 5,000 or so people. Where did those thousands of people? I am not mistaken, they are rushing towards this fort." Several mercenary commanders quickly climbed Evan Fort's perimeter wall, and following the direction of the guards, they saw dwarming figures moving about Peacock Forest area. Those figures were thickly dotted. From a visual estimate, there were over 50,000 troops. Because the moon didn't shine through the darkness of the night, they couldn't clearly see the appearances of those shadows. They could only see the armor and weapons of the other party, which gleamed with pallid light. "Retreat, retreat. We don't want money. Eric, that boy cheated us. We clearly came to an agreement for facing 5,000 or so enemy troops. Changing that number to tens of thousands of people. This matter has nothing to do with us even if the money offered is vastly increased." These mercenary commanders, who were usually anyway decisive in handling affairs, under the pressure of the desperate situation, also became frantic. Since the number of enemies had increased, it was clearly different from the agreed business terms. Money was one thing, but this was clearly the business of getting killed. They would have considered staying at least a little if the pay had been increased, but without any offers. Thinking this, the mercenary commanders issued the retreat orders without any hesitation. There were indeed over 100,000 troops in the forest. However, these troops weren't living people, but rather undead. They were all zombies and skeleton warriors pacing up and down. Because there was no moonlight and starlight, the visibility was very poor, so the mercenaries couldn't clearly see their appearances, merely observing their armors and weapons that reflected a pallid light, thereby making the mercenaries mistake them for human troops. This could also be considered fortunate. If the mercenaries had clearly seen their shadowy opponents, they might have been in an even more panicked state than now, leaving shadows in their hearts for the rest of their lifetimes. Whatever one said, an undead legion was far more frightening than a human legion and also had a bigger deterrent force. Clyde and ancient demon King Andrisno stood in Peacock Forest area, watching the retreat of those mercenaries from Evan Fort. The undead legion didn't directly participate in this war, they just paced up and down while playing with fire here, nothing more. As for the other side being frightened and retreating, that wasn't his issue. It was just the other side not having sufficient courage, nothing more. The human race is like this. They innately fear the darkness. Even if there is nothing in the darkness, they foolishly think otherwise. Andrisno, you seem to understand a great deal about the human race. No, no. Lord Clyde, I am just expressing my thoughts. I also don't understand much about the human race. Is there no movement from that fellow Eric? Ancient demon King Andrisno's blood. Red demonic pupils emitted blood. Red radiance. That was the state she entered whenever she commanded the demonic creatures. The specters that had secretly snuck into the frontline for scouting consisted of the will.o. wisps that had raided the granary area as well as undead and skeleton warriors that paced up and down Peacock Forest area. These over 100,000 demonic creatures were all under Andrisno's command. Clyde didn't participate because his abilities didn't fall into the category of summoning and controlling demonic creatures. The specters in the front just sent the latest intelligence. Eric seems to have just woken up from a drunken sleep and still doesn't know the current circumstances. This guy, he truly came here to play. Determine his coordinates, I will go and take a look at what ability he has. Clyde had thought that Eric, the commander of the opposite camp, would have made some big moves, but via the intelligence report, he learned that this fellow had truly had no reserve plans from the start. In addition, he was still drunk even as his camp was under assault. It now seemed that Clyde had been overanxious. The commander of the opposite camp was a mediocre person. Chapter 68. The Terrifying Night in Peacock Forest Area, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Zemengsi Continent Southern Region, outside Steinbeck Fief, Peacock Forest Area, the place where Cromwell Principality's Expeditionary Army was stationed because the supply center was on fire, the frontline was thrown into chaos. In addition, the over 20,000 mercenaries defending Evan Fort were frightened by tens of thousands of undead who had disguised themselves as an armed force, making the battle-hardened veterans choose to retreat. When they withdrew, the fort next door lost the chance to engage in mutual support. Cromwell Principality's commander Eric had just woken up due to the outside noise. He then walked out with a large group of dead, drunk, high-ranking military officers. After walking outside the commander tent and taking stock of the scene, he saw that soaring blue flame behind the field of tents from a cursory glance. He paused before realizing that location was where the supply center was. Eric's complexion suddenly became very unsightly. No matter how mediocre he was, even he knew that once the supply center was burned, he would have already lost the majority of the war. What's going on? What's Jenny doing? How come that fire still hasn't been extinguished? Those mercenaries, quickly send them out. Your Excellency Eric, the rear area is cursed. Faint blue flames have ignited our army provision supply center. Those mercenaries have already begun to withdraw, saying the opposite camp has over 100,000 troops, and they have nothing to do with the matters present here. What 100,000 troops? Steinbeck Fief has only 5,000 or so people. Those lowly mercenaries are thinking of taking advantage of the occasion to drive up the price. After Eric saw those faint blue flames soaring in the distance, he also felt that something was strange and wished to have more support. Regardless of a curse or not, the most important thing for him now was to retain those 50,000 troops in his hands. If these troops suffered heavy losses, then when he returned, he certainly wouldn't be able to report to Duke Krend about any trace of success in his task. As for those mercenaries, those over 20,000 people of the various mercenary groups weren't even within his considerations. Even if all of them perished here, simply compensating the mercenary guild would be enough. As for the over 30,000 rear service personnel in the rear area, Eric similarly didn't intend to aid them in any way. The rear service personnel couldn't be considered as part of the regular army, and their positions were similar to that of mercenaries, and it didn't matter if all of them were lost. As for Miss Jenny, they were not biologically related brother since they were born of the same father but a different mother. In addition, Eric didn't like this younger sister who threatened his superiority, therefore, he decided not to care about Jenny. 1 year ago, Jenny's action of forcing Princess Natalie to withdraw her troops had truly stolen the limelight. For a moment, it had overshadowed the other young masters and misses. On the surface, Eric had said nothing, but in fact, he had already hidden many thoughts in his heart. This time, taking advantage of the occasion to kill her by proxy seemed to have no issues and would allow him to escape any punishment. Thinking this, Eric immediately transmitted his orders. Seal off all of Grey Fort's entrances and exits, guard them tightly until the daytime. Now, we cannot see clearly the situation inside. Regardless of who approaches the fort, shoot without exceptions. Your Excellency Eric, like this. Isn't Miss Jenny still outside? Does what I say count here or what Jenny says? I am the commander. Chief. All other opinions can wait until daytime. Eric rudely refused the other high-ranking military officer's suggestions. He ordered to seal off the entire Grey Fort and hold their positions until tomorrow to make better plans. Because all moonlight and starlight was covered by a dark mist, the night visibility was very low, so even retreating was unwise here. If the opponents pursued them and attacked, then they would suffer heavy casualties. Holding fast without going to battle was a sensible alternative, even if somewhat heartless, nothing more. Through these actions, it could be determined that Eric had given up Jenny and those over 30,000 rear. Service personnel. As for the mercenary groups, he hadn't even considered them. Evan Fortress's over 20,000 mercenaries weren't as lucky as Grey Fort's troops. If they weren't flurried and properly defended Grey Fort, as long as they persisted until dawn, it would all be fine. However, the few commanders of the mercenary groups, each did things in their own way. Other than running away, they didn't have other unanimous opinions. They were all afraid of the others trapping them, thus, Evan Fort was directly discarded. Eric, that fellow seems to have some strategy. Unfortunately, you all will not be able to hold on till the dawn. Clyde appeared on the outskirts of Great Fort beneath the cover of the night. After seeing the firm fence of Grey Fort, he praised Eric's intellect. In the next moment, a black energy ball gathered in Clyde's palm. In this dark night, this black energy ball was practically invisible. Clyde gently flicked the black energy ball towards the entrance gate of Grey Fort. With a burst of light, a big explosion occurred at Grey Fort's entrance gate. The black energy ball blasted a hole in the big entrance gate. After the explosion, the mercenaries who had originally been fleeing all around in confusion because they were unable to find the correct path in the middle of the night crazily flocked towards Grey Fort regardless of anything else after seeing the light, since they knew sticking to the larger army was their best hope for survival. Stop, this place is restricted for you lot to enter. Scram back to where you came from. We are friendly forces. Don't attack. Fart, friends. This father will attack you so. Called friendly forces, or else, scram. Where's my sword? Humiliating this father. The regular army of Cromwell Principality looked down on those mercenaries, and at this time, the contradictions only intensified. Both sides directly entered a chaotic battle at the broken entrance gate of the fort. The mercenaries grouped together upon being collectively humiliated. Soon, a large number of mercenaries rushed over and supported the mercenaries who had initially began the conflict. Cromwell Principality's troops were also unwilling to be outdone, so they concentrated their troops here to suppress the riots. The entrance gate area of Grey Fort suddenly turned into a battlefield with glints and flashes of daggers and swords. As for the backstage manipulator of this chaos, he didn't pay any attention to the matters of this entrance gate. He changed his direction and quietly entered Grey Fort from the side entrance, since everyone's attentions were diverted by the loud battle on the other side. No one took notice of Clyde, this infiltrator. Clyde carefully concealed his traces all along the way and finally found Eric's commander tent. Before arriving at the commander tent, Clyde had in passing dealt with a mercenary and snatched his armband. Outside the commander tent, Clyde put that mercenary's armband on his right hand before donning a grey cloak and using a cotton cloth to block half of his face. After disguising himself, Clyde openly entered the commander tent. What's going on? Those mercenaries actually dared to rise in rebellion. Kill them all. Those who dared to enter the fort, don't let even one off. Your Excellency Eric, we can make space. Shut up, those petty and low mercenaries are not worthy of this fort made for our noble troops. There should be no magicians among them. How exactly did those peasants blast our fort's entrance gate? In the commander tent, Eric grumbled to high-ranking military officers under his command. That golden short-haired youth, although his attractiveness index was not bad, appeared extremely frivolous. He basically didn't hear any suggestions from his subordinates. Those senior military officers most likely knew that Eric would turn a deaf ear to their advice and would simply act arbitrarily, much like his father Duke Krend, thus, they only symbolically suggested a few sentences and shut up. Surviving was more important than loyalty. At that time, screams came from outside the door. Those several soldiers guarding the door were quickly killed by Clyde. He had cut them in two with a few swings of his sword. Clyde didn't use any magic, he simply used a heavy sword to cut through his obstacles like a true warrior. Relying on his superior physical strength, the heavy sword that originally had to be carried with two hands was easily hefted in one. The weapon he now used was the same heavy sword that Princess Natalie had used to use when she had still been a berserker swordswoman. How did a mercenary run over here? Guards. Facing Clyde, who had intruded here all by himself, the senior military officers were flustered. These high-ranking military officers under Eric's command weren't courageous. The combat powers of most of them were on the same level as that of a mediocre soldier, basically not presentable considering their ranks. Clyde quickly rushed over and instantly killed 3 senior military officers who blocked his way. Upon seeing this, the other military officers were so scared that they scattered in all directions and gave way to Clyde. You all. These good.4.nothings, quickly stop him for me. Eric pulled out a saber, but looking at his fleeing subordinates, he couldn't help but lack in confidence. Although he had martial skills, Clyde had gotten rid of 3 senior military officers in a second. His combat power was clearly above his. Clyde didn't prepare for the prince's attack and simply walked straight towards Eric. Eric used all his strength and stabbed, aiming at Clyde's heart. Clyde didn't act, and Eric was secretly delighted, thinking the other party had just gotten lucky a moment ago and that his true combat power was actually not much. Mentally patting himself on the back for daring to challenge this fake warrior, his sword plunged forward. However, in the next second, he was dumbfounded. That high-grade saber forged with essence iron, when it was not far away from stabbing Clyde's chest, seemed to have been stuck into an air wall. No matter how much he exerted himself, the saber didn't move at all. At that time, Clyde raised the huge sword in his hand. How can this be? You. Wait, we can properly discuss a price. However, Clyde didn't feel like speaking nonsense. His hand swung down, directly killing Eric before the commander seat. Eric was cleaved into 2, and his red blood splashed all about on the spot. The commander tent was dyed red. Those senior military officers on the scene were thoroughly frightened. Like they had gone mad, they ran outside the tent. Not to mention avenging Eric, they just wanted to save their own lives now, nothing more. Normally, they would be worried about returning to their nation, but this was a special case. Eric was not the only son of Duke Krend. If he died, there were still quite a few more who could take his position. It was not worthwhile to put their lives on the line to avenge him. In the blink of an eye, only Clyde was left in the command tent. The situation outside the command tent was still chaotic. The chaotic battle between mercenaries and Cromwell Principality's troops was still ongoing. Before, stopping this battle would have been possible, but with the death of Eric, it was basically impossible for peaceful negotiation between these two parties. Sure enough, I still overestimated this fellow. Clyde sighed and began to ransack the command tent to see whether there was anything valuable. Previously, Bishop Nichols had swept away tens of thousands of gold coins from him, not finding a place to recoup that loss would be no good. After killing the commander, Clyde was the only one who would still dare to arrogantly plunder spoils of war from the other party's command tent. He was confident that those senior military officers wouldn't dare to come for revenge. That was indeed the case. Until Clyde completely looted the place, not a single senior military officer returned. He didn't even see a single soldier. The other side was already so scared that they didn't even dare to pretend to put up a front against him. However, that fellow Eric still had some valuable things. Clyde found many pure gold ornaments. He estimated that he could sell them for money, so it was better than nothing. Chapter 69. The Ultimate Defeat of Cromwell Principality's Expeditionary Force, Part 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. With the death of Commander Eric, Clyde achieved an interim victory. After he killed Eric, Clyde directly looted Eric's base camp without scruples, as if he were a player picking up equipment after finishing off a boss. Cromwell Principality belonged to a comparatively prosperous principality, so Clyde was able to collect a large number of exquisite gold ornaments within this command tent. From the workmanship, it could be guessed that these ornaments were expensive. However, when Eric had come to fight this war, other than these gold ornaments, he hadn't brought any other valuable treasures. Thus, Clyde could only collect those trinkets and some sealed good wines, nothing more. After all, Eric wasn't quite that hedonistic. Clyde had no intentions to sell these gold ornaments for money. He had many female companions around him, so he could just give them these as presents, thanking them for their contributions towards Steinbeck fief. There was nothing to be embarrassed about. This time, he just happened to give the things he looted from Eric to those girls. He scratched the back of his head while blushing. Okay, perhaps it was a bit like presenting Buddha with flowers given by another. After plundering the tent, Clyde turned around and entered the rear tent. This was the banquet site where Eric and those high-ranking military officers had indulged in debauchery before. Now, all those senior officials had disappeared from here, leaving just leftovers on the tables as well as a few broken wine bottles that had been abandoned in their haste. Apart from this, those beautiful maids were also still here. They had nowhere else to go, and their entire bodies were in bare states with both hands shackled behind their backs while they kneeled on the ground. They also had metal collars around their necks. Iron chain connected to these collars with the other ends tied to the legs of a table, allowing them no path for escape. The aristocrats of Clark Alliance's member nations were all old gentlemen who knew how to play with slaves due to great experience. Each one was more formidable than the other. In fact, few in this world could claim to match their skill. Although Eric had left Midway, these beautiful maid-servants had been offered no way to escape. Their elastic and ample snow-white bodies had magic brands that symbolized their slave statuses. With this brand on them, they basically couldn't obtain regular statuses in any nation of Clark Alliance. They only had the fate of having their masters changed non-stop. After the maids saw Clyde wore a mercenary armband, they were so scared that they shivered. In their impressions, the image of a mercenary was very bad. They were a bunch who would do basically anything for money. Clyde was too lazy to explain himself. Considering these maids' beautiful faces, he gently swung his heavy sword, and the iron chains connected to their collars were cut off. With a few flicks of his hand he also carefully broke through the shackles binding their hands. Eric is already dead. You all are free. What's wrong? Don't believe my words. That fellow's corpse is still lying outside. Merely, it is split into two halves, and you all might not recognize it. No, that can't be. Lord Mercenary, we don't have anywhere to go. Can you? We can do anything. The maid's face didn't show any traces of happiness. Freedom was already an extravagant hope for them. Even if Eric had already died, their slave status would still be unchanged. According to the rules of Clark Alliance, if a slave had the same slave master for over 3 years, then the slave would have the chance to apply for redeeming oneself. However, once the master was changed, this count would restart once more. Most slave masters had absolutely no intention to give slaves any chance to redeem themselves. They would exchange slaves just before the deadline. Therefore, as time passed, the slaves would gradually give up any desires for freedom. Thinking of this, many maids guarded the collars around their necks with their hands. Seemingly, it was their only support. With a collar around their necks, they would still appear to have a master. It was dangerous without a collar, as anyone could bully ownerless slaves. Facing those pleading expressions of these maids, Clyde hesitated for a moment but was unable to bear their misery and decided to help them. If he didn't help them, these maids who had become ownerless after Eric's death might be divided by those high-ranking military officers under Eric if they were lucky. However, if they were unlucky, then they might be divided by the soldiers or those mercenaries, and they would have a cycle of tragedy. Although Clyde was still disguised as a mercenary, the maids could still see that this man had at least some aspects of a respectable demeanor and pinned all their hopes on him. "Forget it. I will take you all with me, but you all must listen to me. After leaving this place, I will arrange a place for you all. Lord Mercenary, please don't give us to other people. You all don't need to worry about this." After promising repeatedly not to give them away, Clyde finally satisfied these maids. Quieting down, they then wore cloaks according to his request and set out with this mercenary. They were completely bare beneath the cloaks. Now, since they didn't have enough time, Clyde could only arrange for them like this. He didn't have time to look for suitable clothing for them. Undergarments, panties, and so on could wait until they left Evan Fort and returned to the safety of Stanley City. In order to completely make these maids at ease, under their repetitive requests, Clyde used enslavement magic to replace the magic slave imprints on their bodies, exchanging Eric's family imprint for Steinbeck Fief's imprint. This enslavement magic had been taught to him by Princess Natalie. All aristocrats of Clark Alliance, regardless of their professions, had grasped this basic magic. It was the method to imprint their family's slave mark. This kind of imprinting was differentiated on the basis of time, indicating the duration of the slave status. A magic imprint lasted for a 3-year time period, an original imprint lasted at least 5 years, and a supreme imprint was permanent. Because the 3-year period made things convenient for trading slaves, aristocrats of Clark Alliance usually used magic imprints. Only for those slaves who were especially liked by the owners and who the owners didn't want to trade or share were branded with an original imprint. This was not the first time Clyde had done this. In the past, at Lucifer's request, he had set up similar magic imprints on those beautiful mercenaries and adventurers, all of which would last for 3 years. After the new magic imprints were finalized, those maids finally showed peaceful expressions as if they had found a new home to return to. With the help of these maids, Clyde's gain was plentiful. In the rear area of the command tent, he found Eric's hidden private collection. That fellow had actually deceived Duke Kren, since his private collection was so great only because it contained the money and goods that had originally been meant to be sent to Duke Kren as gifts. He even dared to embezzle bribes to his father. Eric could be counted as a truly unique person. What surprised Clyde more was that in the list detailing who had sent what gift to Duke Kren, there were names of several of Adrian Empire's more influential officials. Adrian Empire belonged to Victor Alliance, and Cromwell Principality belonged to Clark Alliance, so they should have a hostile relationship. Toward this kind of political action of giving gifts to hostile forces, Clyde temporarily decided to turn a blind eye. He just wrote down the name list on a separate sheet of paper. Later, he would deliver this to Princess Alyssa and see how she would handle this. After finishing looting the entire tent, Clyde left along with these maids who he had disguised as soldiers. Then he snatched a carriage and went towards the outskirts of Grey Fort. The entire Grey Fort was still in a chaotic state. The armed conflict between mercenaries and Cromwell Principality's army was still ongoing, and no one paid any attention to this carriage. Occasionally, several people who didn't have eyes had tried to intercept the carriage, but regardless of whether they were mercenaries or Cromwell Principality's soldiers, Clyde had cut them into halves with a single sword swing. After killing several hapless fools, the remaining people realized that they couldn't afford to offend this carriage. When they saw this carriage approaching, they made way on their own initiative, letting Clyde's party smoothly leave. At the rear area of Grey Fort, the contest between Jenny and Princess Natalie was also near its end. Jenny, who had originally been moving quickly by relying on her assassin profession, could still stall Princess Natalie for a decent period of time. Jenny's plan was to stall Princess Natalie, waiting for Eric to dispatch troops to assist. Steinbeck Fief had just 5,000 or so militia. If Eric dispatched troops, then with Princess Natalie's intelligence, she would definitely choose to withdraw the troops. However, Eric had already been killed, and those senior military officers under him had never had any intention to dispatch troops to aid her. They were busy scheming on how to properly sing from the same hymn sheet, shifting the blame of Eric's death to those mercenaries. Basically, no one even remembered Miss Jenny, who was fighting here in the granary. A blood-curdling scream distracted Jenny and almost got herself chopped in half. At the last moment, Princess Natalie timely stopped her hand, stopping the sword which nearly cut into Jenny's shoulder. As it turned out, many demons had appeared on the battlefield, and these demons suddenly attacked Cromwell Principality's rear. Service personnel who were still resisting and killed them. The killing methods of these demons were very bloody. They directly used their claws to pierce an opponent's chest and tear them to shreds. All those maids who had followed Jenny for many years had marital skills and could be regarded as female guards. However, they were similarly subdued by those demons. The demons had received orders beforehand not to kill women and instead to use methods similar to slave capturing techniques. Now, those female guards' hands were forced onto their backs, making them unable to move. Little big sister, don't struggle. Come with us. You. When did you appear? Ancient demon King Andrisno flashed behind Jenny. Her movement speed was lightning fast. While Jenny was in a stunned, unguarded state, this silver-haired Lolita seized the dagger in the princess's hand. In addition to snatching the dagger, Andrisno also grabbed Jenny's wrist and emitted dark energy, making Jenny felt like she had been electrocuted, instantly paralyzing her. Natalie, you really. Jenny felt complicated. She hadn't lost to Natalie, however, a little Lolita had subdued her. However, she didn't feel too disgraced. With the Demon King's strength of this Lolita, among the princesses of all the human nations, there were not many who could last even a few rounds against her. Even Ophelia, that kind of war princess, would also be at a disadvantage against Andrisno. The human race had an upper ceiling, they weren't comparable to demon kings. Little big sister, relax a bit. Don't bite your tongue. It hurts. I must tell you though that if you commit suicide, then the guards of little big sister will be given to the demons. Jenny's face stiffened. Before she could react, Andrisno gently pried open her teeth and took out a pill especially used to commit suicide by those of the assassin profession concealed behind a tooth. Jenny looked at those captured female guards. They had all followed her for many years. Remembering their great loyalty, she helplessly lowered her head and admitted defeat. Andrisno, can you let Jenny go? She was just fulfilling her duty, nothing more. Princess Natalie, this depends on Lord Clyde's intentions. However, it's not impossible as long as she becomes one of us. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. I will help. I will make her agree. Wait, Natalie. I don't want to. Be quiet. I am helping you. Originally, Jenny had still wanted to show off and stubbornly refused to admit defeat, but Princess Natalie directly covered her little mouth so that she couldn't speak. She could only use her eyes to protest. At that time, Clyde's carriage just happened to arrive at the burning supply granary behind Grey Fort.